Okay, hey, it's Nick Groves here, Drift Outfitters today, doing some videos of some new flies that I've been messing around with this past fall. Today we're going to do a really quick sort of freestyle swung fly, something that I've been messing around with this fall just based on the difference in river conditions. We've had a big time low water season, not a lot of rain. Temps have really fluctuated up and down, so we've tended towards more sparsely presented flies. You know, less flash, a little bit more subtle in tones, and just making sure that you're kind of keeping the fly up in the surface or up in the upper column of the river, just based on the depths that we're dealing with. So yeah, we're going to get going through this one, and hope you enjoy. Okay, so we're going to get started right away here on this. Again, it's a steelhead swung fly, kind of more intent on lower profile, sparse, and kind of facing the low water conditions we've had this fall. So we'll get going right away. We're going to start by running a 33 mil round eye shank from Aqua Flies. I find that this length lends really well to a bunch of different sort of platforms, lengths and sizes and shapes of flies. So we've got that in the vise. We're going to tie on pretty much every streamer and steelhead fly I tie is on Vivus 140. Thread, I find that it's just got, you know, perfect stretch, really good strength, and doesn't tend to overcrowd things too much. So just going to lay a thread base down on the fly here, come back up. You know, more than you would think. We're going to put a bead chain eye on this, and this is just basically to help with some keel and some head profile. Usually the majority of the steelhead flies I've been tying the last couple seasons, I am going to follow more of a Feenstra style of fly, and go ahead and set these eyes a little bit further back. So we're going to actually go back, you know, probably a third of the way back down the shank. And what that does is it just gives us the ability, once we get to the front, to actually do some tapering on the head. You know, sometimes I think it helps the fly to dig and hunt a little better in the water, and just gives more of an imitative baitfish presentation rather than suggestive. So that's just the lead eyes there. So again, or the bead chain eyes, so we're about a third of the way back there. Then going to take and rig up my stinger hook. Pretty much exclusively, I'm currently using the Aqua Flies Talon number 4. Seems to be the hook size that doesn't get in the way, doesn't pull the fly down, and just seems to be exactly where I want it. And number of different ways you can rig this, but essentially I'm running a Power Pro 60-pound Power Pro on this. I find that it does have a decent amount of stiffness, and as long as you're fishing or swinging a fly in the current on a number 4 hook, it will keep it sort of back without hanging down too much. I find that the number 2s just seem to be a little bit too heavy for the most of the flies that I'm tying. So I do rig the hook up before I tie the fly. I find that on the river, generally I like to have things rigged up. So I'll tie a few of these, and if I do foul a hook or break something, you know, I have a backup. But you can change the hooks out on this. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm just going to eyeball up where I want that back hook to sit, and I'm going to lay the braid flat on the top, and then I'm going to lash it in just with a couple loose wraps, and that gives me the ability to take a look at it, determine exactly where I want that hook to sit back, and I can mess around with it, making sure that it's laying on top. And then I'm holding the hook back on the top of the shank, and I'm just doing relatively loose wraps right back to the vice jaw itself, and that's going to lay perfectly flat and upright. Okay, and that's with the braid, that stuff really locks in. So I've never actually seen these pull out. And then I'll come right back up to the eye, and just for some reinforcement, I'll then take both ends of the braid and wrap it over either side of the eye, and then just cinch that down even more with some cross wraps there, and then I will come back towards the back, cut that braid off, and you're basically good to go. And that's basically the setup of this fly. The next step is I'm going to basically do a palmered craft for a loop technique. So this fly is 100% synthetic. There is no natural materials in this at all. which generally means that you have an economical fly and you have like a huge ability to vary your colors and tones and really work with the synthetic materials here. So this is basically all craft fur and ice dub, some flash, and that's basically it. So what I'm going to do to start is I'm going to use some of my, many of you have seen me use this stuff before. Sort of got onto it from Kevin Feenstra, who uses this flash a lot in his flies, and it's a relatively stout and thick or wide diameter mylar flash. And I'm going to lay this in on the tail just to create some tail flash. It really, when it does swing in the water, you get a pretty intense amount of sort of subtle flash. So what I do want to do is make sure that when I tie this tail in at the back that I'm not going past the point of the hook. That way it can swing freely and I'm not going to get a lot of fouling going on. So I will go ahead and I've cut it just a bit of a taper on the back edge of that, not necessarily required. And I've just tied that in on the one side, loose. I'll trim that off and then I'll do another piece on the other side. And we'll just line that up so that they're relatively even on the hook. And I'll just do a couple more sort of loose wraps. And then there, after a few turns, you can straighten that out to make sure that it's going to be level or horizontal with the shank of the fly. Trim that off. We'll just lash that in tight. And if it's not perfect, that's okay. Once we take the fly out, you'll be able to bend that stuff back. It'll lay directly and straight back. And then the next step is we're going to do basically 2 loops. I'm going to palmer some cut craft fur up through the body, kind of like a woolly bugger style, but again, using synthetic. You have that ability to really play with the materials and do something that normally you'd only sort of consider palmering up with a feather, which you could do on this fly, but you get the advantage of adjusting to any size you want. So the only real trick here is that I'm going to set 2 loops up. So the first one here, I'm going to set a dubbing loop right at the back, and I'm just going to set that aside. And then I'm actually going to do another loop, and I'm just going to dub up a body of dubbing. And any kind of dubbing will work here, and I'll be using a dubbing twister, a dubbing loop tool, whatever you're most comfortable with. In this case, I just do want a little bit more of that like iridescent kind of funky, this is a UV gray ice dub. Anything will work. Tend to use more UV tones for, you know, some baitfish imitation flash. I'm just going to take some of this out and throw it in a loop and wrap that forward. So usually I'll pull the strands out and get a nice sort of even pile, and then we'll set it in the loop. Make sure it looks relatively even. It's not super important. This is just to build a bit of a body profile and start spinning that. And if you have some thicker areas, this is your opportunity after your first spin just to tease that out a little bit and thin it out. And that I find running loops with ice dub and stuff like this rather than, you know, waxing your thread and palmering it, or just making a thread rope. I find that it just gives a little bit more sort of splay and sparseness to it. So you could throw this in a bobbin cradle. Right now I'm just going to go down and dirty here. And I'm just going to lightly wrap this up to about 1 bead chain behind the eye and tie that off. And we'll secure that. Pretty straightforward. And then I'm going to grab the second loop that I left, and I'm going to throw my spinner on there, and then I'm going to prep what's going to be the palmer forward, and this is going to create even more of a profile. So using and you could do this both ways. You could also put a tail of craft fur in here just to sort of help the taper. I sometimes, just with the size of the fly I'm going for, I'll opt to not do that. And we're going to use the Aquafly's Aquafur. This stuff is awesome. super versatile. You get a lot of it, and the advantage of palmering this up on a cut, which you'll see, is it's really supple material. So it does lay down just like a feather and does not stick up once it's in the water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, now that I have my loop sort of set here, I'm going to cut a section and put a section of this craft fur in a loop. And this, the particular color that I'm using here, just with the subtle and the variation of it, is called Frosted Sculpin. I find it's got some grays, olives, and blacks all sort of built into one, and works really well on this fly. So I've cut a piece here, and there's a lot of underfur in this too, which you could actually save and use as dubbing. I'm going to sort of take that out and basically just remove some of it so I have more of a sparse loop going. So I prepared a bit of a clump here that we'll be able to use to palmer forward, and the advantage is too that you're not kind of limited by the size and the shape of the feather. So I'm going to prep that the way I want it, and then I'm going to lay it down on the bench and sort of spread it out so I can get it into a clip. Okay, so I've just prepared the material by cutting to the length that I want. I've left it overhanging on my bench, and I'm just going to throw it into a clip. Any kind of clip will do. You just want to make sure that it's secure so that as I throw it into the loop, it's going to sort of hold and stay about as even as I'm doing it here. The other thing I'm going to do, I don't want this full length as I'm palmering forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut the length that I want right off and cut the tips off, and then leave a little bit of the bigger collar here. So you can see I've cut that out, and now what I have is just this is what's going to palmer my actual where you would normally palmer a feather, like in a woolly bugger. So I'm going to drop this this clip into my loop. I'm going to pass that through, and the cut ends are going to be at the top, and I'm going to grab that. And I can now adjust slightly if I want to, you know, stretch this out or whatever. I can also move it, you know, right up to where my the start of my thread. So I'm just going to start spinning, and you see I got my finger there just to hold the spin so that it doesn't, it just keeps the materials trapped as I spin. This is your opportunity kind of halfway through. You'll sense the thread getting tighter as you go, that it's going to lock that stuff in. But usually I'll stop halfway through the amount of spinning I want to do, and just make sure everything's teased out and nothing's caught. And then I'll put that into a clip and trim that off. And then again, you could put this into a cradle. This one I'm just going to sort of wrap forward. So as we start, and the material starts to pick up at the tail, I'm going to start to palmer, and I don't want to completely overlap this. I just want it to be sparse. So you can see as I'm wrapping through, I'm leaving some of that dubbing exposed. I don't really want to trap everything down with the craft fur. So now that I've dubbed that up, I still have some of the longer pieces just to start to create the head of the fly. So I'll just go ahead and wrap that right off till I'm done, till the loop's over, and tie that off. And we can trim that, and then stop and have a look, just to make sure that, you know, everything's happening the way I want it to happen. And you can see that at this point too, you could brush this out if you want. The other advantage of these loops with like synthetic materials is that in the loop it's extremely strong. So you don't have to rib that back through with wire. That's you know, considering that that's a double loop of a 130 thread, that's going to be pretty robust. I've never had that loop come apart yet or break off. So you can see here that we've got, you know, our underdubbed body, that iridescent, that UV blue gray is going to shine through there pretty good. And then it's just, you know, we're going to do another loop. This time I'm going to add some flash to it. So on the actual fly, I'm going to blend a few different Flashaboos. Cranberry is a big favorite of mine. I find that it's not super in your face, especially with the low flows and clear water. A lot more subtle. And I'm going to add some barred blue Flashaboo as well to this. So the colors are sort of here we've got the barred blue and the cranberry there. So this is a little bit more tricky of a loop, just because you're dealing with Flashabou, and a lot of times placing those strands in the loop, your hands can get pretty sticky. So it is a little bit more finicky, but if you do it well, once you get the hang of it, what it does is as you palmer forward, it's actually not just clumping that flash into a wing. It's actually sparsely spreading it throughout your loop as you wrap forward. So you're not just getting one even uniform wing, and it actually helps the fly to swing a lot better, especially when you're dealing with synthetics. The key is sort of to build a profile with not a lot of material and not let it clump up. So here you could do a number of things. You could vary the color. You know, if you wanted a straight, more sculpin color, you can see the frosted here has a multitude of colors in it, so it's really good tones. And I'm just going to do another simple loop with craft fur and laying some flash over top. Same step as what we just saw. So I'll prep my loop here. And at this point too, you know, there is an advantage to throwing the flash in a loop, but what you could also do is do sort of a reverse tie of it. So you would do it, throw in some flash all around the fly behind the bead chain, maybe do your craft fur loop, and then throw another sort of reverse tie of flash all around the fly. And that's an easy way, a simple way to get the same sort of idea without having to deal with the finicky loop situation. I will throw some light wax on that thread too, just so we don't lose everything when we throw it in the loop. So again, I'm just going to prep another section of the craft fur here. So I'll pull out a piece and do the same prep work. Again, you can vary, the advantage here is that you can really vary your length and make whatever adjustments you want to the length of the fur itself. So I'm going to leave this one a little bit longer and just take out with my hands, you could use a comb too, just take out some of the under fur and the butt section of that. And then again, I'm going to lay this down on the table and prep a loop. As I do that, I'm just laying it on the table and spreading that out, sort of the width of the clip, and that's going to give me the ability to lay in, if my hands aren't too sticky, lay in some flash on top of that. So I'll take a few strands first of the cranberry. So you can see I have my loop down there. And I'm just going to start by laying in, and again, this isn't heavy. We're only putting in a few strands of flash in this. And if all goes well, we'll be able to trap all of that into a loop. This is the one tricky part, and again, there is some variational ways you could do this without the loop, but it's kind of fun when you can pull it off because it's kind of a one-stop shop. So I'm just taking another few strands of the barred blue, and I'm going to try and lay that over top as well. And I've just taken the Flashabou and I've just kind of cut it in half. Okay. So that's basically it. We just want to overhang that over the table so that we can get it all in a clip. And we'll try and grab as much as we can. If we lose some, it's not the end of the world. So there. We've now got that in a clip. It's sort of the same idea as like a Jerry French, like a complex loop or whatever. I've waxed my thread and have my loop prepared. And I'm going to drop that clip through the loop and hang on for dear life here. Okay, so I've got that caught. Now's my opportunity if I want to spread it out a little bit. I'm pulling tight on the thread just to keep the loop tight. And the other thing you can do is you can trim while it's all even here, you can trim the butt sections of the loop. I do leave a little bit out on the one side just to create some head profile here. And I'm going to start spinning this, and I'm just going to do a spin just enough to grab it. And then I will tease that out and make sure all of my Flashabou is kind of coming out of the loop and caught. I'm very happy with that. And I also have the full taper of the craft fur in there as well. So you can see it is a relatively sparse loop, and this is going to be a sparse fly. You'll have the chance at the end, if you want to build up the head a little bit, we'll create more of a bigger profile, but that's going to be completely up to you. So I'll just make sure everything's grabbed nice and tight, and then I'll grab that loop in a clip, just a hackle plier material clip, and trim that off. Okay, so this is ready. It looks like an absolute mess right now. So what I'm going to do is I do want to pull these or preen this all back as I wrap, just to make sure I'm not trapping anything, and just wrap forward. So I will come as I start to catch the materials here. I'll just make sure that none of my flashabou or flash or craft fur is getting caught. And I'll start to try and get a couple wraps behind the eye, making sure all the way through that my flash isn't getting trapped down. And then I'll come around the bottom to the front. If I've got enough material left in that loop, I'll come back around and then finish it off at the front until the loop's done. The cool thing about loops too is that you're not limited. You could, if you're not happy with that, if you want more, throw another loop into it. I mean, these flies are all synthetic. They're built to last. They're not going to fall apart. And why not take another 5 minutes if you need to throw another loop or some additional material in there. You could also take this opportunity, because we do have enough head left on that fly, to throw in, if you wanted to add a different color of craft fur there, you could easily do that as well. So you can see now what I can do is I've got all that flash. I basically just cut the strands in half, and what I can do is I can preen it all back now and trim it to the length that I want. So usually what I'll do is I'll unevenly trim it, back just beyond, just for a nice taper. I'll kind of trim it unevenly just to the back of the hook, where the hook's sitting there. And now really all we have left to do is a bit of a tapered head on this. Again, I'm just going to do very simple format here, because I don't want it to be very super obtrusive or intrusive. I'm going to just make sure that I've teased out the craft fur there on all sides, and everything's kind of laying sparsely. And this is really going to sit down in the water too, because we haven't built up a lot of back posts that are going to make this stuff sit high. So here you can blend. There's like 100 different colors of ice dub. One of my favorites, as you've probably seen before in the past, is the UV cinnamon. I'm going to mix it in just to blend a little bit of the color with the frosted sculpin, so I'm using a peacock. So again here, what you can do, the first clump, just to start building a tapered head, I'm going to take a little bit of both, and I'm just going to sort of center tie and fold this back, similar to if you're doing a sort of a streamer head with laser dub or something like that. So I'm going to take the materials, I'm going to kind of just push them or straighten them out together by pulling them. I'll give my bobbin thread a twist clockwise, and what that does is it helps to grab the material as I center it over. And I'm just going to take this material and I'm going to try and get it 360 around the hook right to the back. I'm going to pinch it, and I'm going to give it 2 wraps, pull tight, and fold that back. And that's starting to create, a bit of a head. And what I'll do is I'll just keep building that up with another clump. And if I want to do, finish to the taper, it depends on where, how much head you have. It can vary a little bit. It's not going to make the fly swim any different. So I'm going to take another clump here, preen that back, and then you can see I got a couple hook eyes left. So this is nice too, because a lot of it's going to grab, but you can actually just break off some of that or ice dub, depending on how heavy of a fly you want. And then I can just maybe do a bit of a rope just with the cinnamon, a dubbing rope here, just to finish that off. and then we can tease that out. I will add some glue and whip finish that. Whatever glue you feel comfortable with there. I do usually glue it before I start the whip finish. Just helps to keep that thread from coming out. Okay, and then just because I'm me, we can brush that out a little bit just to get it nice and scraggly. I think the nastier these things look, the better they fish sometimes. But that basically gives you a very nice, sparse, lower water profile fly. The way the loops go with that flash is going to swim really well, and hopefully catch you some fish.